Hey, what's up, Al? How you doing, man? How's your Christmas? What's up, fun-loving couple? Welcome in. Hey, what's up, George? Yeah, well, it keeps you out of trouble, don't it, Al? And stay at home and have some brewskis and have fun, man. That's all that matters. Yeah, all right, man. Hell yeah. There ain't nothing wrong with that. See if we can wait a couple more minutes. See if we don't get more people in. If not, then we'll go ahead and get started. Hey, Karen, how you doing today? That was a great live stream last night. I liked it. Yeah, Sunday is a usual Sunday. Not really much going on. I only seen a couple of stops last night, so I mean, I was kind of late to record it, so I didn't get a chance to film it. Other than that, it was all right. Just your usual Sunday. Hey, what's up, realist? All right. And we'll go ahead and get started, ladies and gentlemen. And this one is about the red ghost, if it's either fact or fiction. We'll be able to tell by the end of the story. Or at least we should be. Any story that purports to be the true story of the Red Ghost must include a cast of characters that includes Edward Beale, Hi Jolly, Mizzou Hastings, an unnamed woman, George Crossman, Jefferson Davis, Cyrus Hamblin, Henry Wayne, David Porter, and John Floyd. A story must be spiced with allegations and hearsay, historical fact and frontier fantasy, the deserts of Arizona and sands of North Africa, military mismanagement, and camel husbandry. Camels are paramount to any version because the Red Ghost, in truth and in folklore, was a camel. There are undocumented facts and hints of faction to support all contentions, and each version plays a vital role in any narration involving the specter that roamed the Arizona desert so long ago. Hey George, if that's gonna be a problem, man, I don't need you here, man. You're gonna start some shit about a damn ranch, then I don't need you here. I just barely started my story right now, and you're interrupting. All right. The story must be spiced with allegations. All right. Archaeologists maintain that camels inhabited what is now Arizona and the rest of the North American continent millions of years ago, migrating across land masses to Africa and the Middle East even as they slowly died out here. One species of camel persisted until a mere 15,000 years ago. Their bones and other remnants are still being found along the California coast. However, they are of interest only to those who mine the elusive relic and hunt the rare fossil. It is the latter-day camels that spark the curiosity of the modern tellers of campfire tales, ghost hunters, and even the occasional liar. First, the alleged true story that brought the red ghost into prominence, then the probable causes. In the spring of 1883, two women were left alone with their children in a small adobe house on a sheep ranch along Eagle Creek in the southeastern corner of Arizona Territory. Being alone in the frontier was always an uncomfortable and dangerous situation, but the women were accustomed to it. Life in the harsh desert had hardened them. The men were gone frequently. This time it was to determine how many of their livestock had been slaughtered or driven off by a band of marauding Apache warriors, supposedly led by the fabled Geronimo. Although aware of the peril, one of the women left the house to replenish the water supply. The spring was only a few yards away from the house, but it was hidden by a stand of willow trees. Shortly after the woman disappeared into the thicket, the family dogs began howling so loud that the other woman ran to the window. As she stood there, she was frozen by the horror of the scenario that was taking place in front of her. She heard screams and saw a huge beast that was, she recalled later, red, enormous, and ridden by a devil. Too terrified to even think of going outside, she barricaded herself and the children inside the house and spent the remainder of the day on her knees, praying that the men would return soon. Night had fallen when they got back. She composed herself enough to relate the story. The men lit torches and went outside to investigate. When they reached the spring, they found the other woman's body trampled almost beyond recognition. Damn. The mud surrounding her corpse was filled with huge cloven hoof prints, many times larger than that of a sheep and almost twice the size of an imprint made by a cow or horse. They also found strands of long red hair clinging to the willows. The body was taken to nearby Solomonville, where a suspicious coroner held an inquest. He thought it had some earmarks of a murder. Maybe a family member had done it. Life on the frontier often produced family tensions that sometimes resulted in violence, but the horribly battered body and the oversized footprints led him to dismiss such thoughts. When he was finished with his inquiry, he ordered the jury to bring in a verdict of death by some manner unknown. The Mojave Miner, a weekly newspaper in Kingman, reported the ruling but gave no further details. The woman's bizarre death might have gone relatively unnoticed except for an incident that happened a few days later in the same area. Two prospectors panning for gold in Chases Creek were unexpectedly wakened in the middle of the night when their tent came crashing down on them. They heard what they described as a loud scream and the sound of pounding hooves. What they saw was even more frightening. An animal much too large to be a horse galloping off into the surrounding brush. The two gold seekers rushed into a nearby mining camp and told their story. Several other miners, probably in disbelief, followed them back to their claim. What they found made the hair on the back of their necks stand straight up. Along the creek bed, they discovered huge footprints that led up a small hill. The prints had obviously been made by a large animal, much larger than any of the domesticated stock used by the miners and ranchers. Also, they found a few long red hairs clinging to the undergrowth. After comparing the two incidents, those involved came to a conclusion. The creature was a camel. Hey, what's up, John? How you doing? Welcome in, man. The legend of the Red Ghost was about to become a chapter in Arizona folklore. The observation that a wild camel was causing so much damage was not surprising, considering the circumstances. Camel sightings were rare but not uncommon in the territory. In the mid-1850s, the U.S. Army launched what became known as the Great Camel Adventure, an experiment that failed miserably for both humans and camels. The region's climate was fit for neither man nor beast, but they came anyway. First came the miners, then the settlers, all determined to extract riches from the arid desert. Their presence sparked conflicts with the natives already on the land, so military involvement soon followed. Hey, what's up, Eric Johnson? Good to have you in, man. It's been a while. Hope you had a great Christmas. But the punishing climate and rugged terrain took their toll on the horses and mules that were traditionally used by the Army as mounts and pack animals. And someone suggested camels as alternatives. The idea was met with ridicule and opposition by most, but others thought it was sound. Among them was Lieutenant George Crossman, an Army veteran of the Seminole campaigns in Florida. Crossman reasoned that for strength in carrying burdens, for patient endurance of labor and privation of food, water and rest, and in some respects for speed also, the camel and dromedary are unrivaled among animals. So apparently the camels are better than horses there. In addition, Crossman observed camels could carry burdens up to 4 times heavier than a mule could. They could travel up to 40 times per day for extended periods and could go without water for 6 to 8 days. These factors would make it ideal for the Arizona desert, he argued. His logic was sound, but no one took Crossman seriously as he presented his case to both Army and political figures. But his luck changed when he met a befriended Major Henry C. Wayne, an Army quartermaster. Wayne knew people in high places. One of them was Jefferson Davis, then a U.S. Senator from Mississippi, and later the President of the Confederate States of America. At the time, Davis was serving as chairman of the Senate Committee of Military Affairs. Serving as chairman, in that capacity, had been an advocate of importing camels for military use. But he wasn't able to do anything about it until 1852, when he was appointed Secretary of War. This gave him the authority, but not all the support he needed. took another 3 years before he was able to convince Congress that it was an experiment worth trying. Hey, what's up, Toe for Life? What's happening, man? Hope everyone had a great Christmas, man. On March 3rd, 1855, the lawmakers appropriated $30,000 for the project, and the U.S. Camel Corps became a reality, on paper at least. First, the Army had to get some camels. This was no easy task, considering that there weren't any left in North America, and the nearest camel outlets appeared to be Africa and the Middle East. Undaunted, the Army ordered Wayne and Lieutenant Dave aboard the troop ship USS Supply, and they shipped out of New York on June 3rd, 1855, headed for North Africa. They made their first buy in Tunisia, but because of inexperience, didn't recognize that their purchase had medical problems that made him unfit for military duty. Buying healthy camels apparently wasn't easy. Many of the good ones involved in the war in the Crimea, carrying troops and supplies to the various fronts. They left Africa and sailed for Malta, Greece, and Turkey, looking for camels but without success. They were, however, learning about camels. Experience taught them that one humped Arabian camels were best for riding, while the two humped Bactrians were better pack animals. They also learned how to detect sick animals that unscrupulous camel dealers tried to sell them. The two procurers finally returned to North Africa and found a plentiful supply in Egypt. But there were no more obstacles to overcome. Egyptian government regulations wouldn't allow them to take the camels out of the country. Under-the-table payments and outright bribes eventually took care of the problem, and the USS Supply left Egypt with a cargo that included 33 camels and 5 camel drovers. The drovers are hired to care for the animals during the 2-month trip back to the United States and to educate American soldiers about their idiosyncrasies and unfamiliar habits once they got in American soil. One of the camels died en route, but the two babies were born. When the ship arrived in Indianola, Texas, they unloaded 34 of the creatures. Hey, what's up, Luke? Welcome in. Rosie Thangs, welcome in. After they were given several weeks of rest, the camels were moved to Camp Verde, about 60 miles west of San Antonio. Once the beasts were put to little use other than carrying supplies from town, although Wayne sent continual reports to Davis back in Washington, D.C. about the camels' progress, the two had a falling out over whether or not to breed the animals. Wayne favored the experiment, Davis was against it. Wayne eventually asked for a transfer, and the Camel Corps underwent a series of leadership changes until 1857, still trying to put the animals to good use. The Army assigned them to a crew they had been ordered to survey unexplored territory between El Paso, Texas, and the Colorado River. The party was led by Lieutenant Edward Fitzgerald Beale and consisted of 25 camels, 44 soldiers, numerous horses and mules, and 2 camel drovers, Greek George and Philip Tidrow. After some initial problems, the camels performed well, often leading the crew over terrain that mules and horses could not easily maneuver. At one point, the camels actually saved the expedition from disaster when their instruments failed them and they became lost. Beale was jubilant and continued his mission, arriving at the Colorado River without further incident. But although the camels had won over the skeptics in the Army, Washington was not convinced. This did not bode well for the Camel Corps, and things got even worse when the hierarchy changed. James Buchanan was elected president in 1856, and one of his first moves was to replace Davis with John B. Floyd as Secretary of War. This led to some bitter infighting between Floyd and Major General David Twiggs, his army commander in Texas. Floyd was a proponent of the Camel Corps. Twiggs hated the animals. He was outraged when he found out that part of his command was a herd of camels. His hatred was so intense that he sent a steady stream of complaints to his superior about the creatures that he called smelly and rotten. Twiggs had a lot of support among his men. Those ordered to work with the camels claimed that they were bad-tempered, spit a lot, held grudges, frequently refused to follow orders, and often kicked them. And he said the camels stink. They smelled so bad the handlers maintained that they not only offended the olfactory senses of the humans, but also caused panic and stampeding among the domesticated livestock at the camp. There were other complaints that carried even more weight. Although the camels performed well when called upon to serve, they used only sparingly. They carried supplies once in a while and made infrequent surveying trips. Outside of that, they spent their time confined to their specially built pens when they were seen as an increasing financial drain on the military. The end was near. 8 years after it started, the noble experiment was about to end. Awesome, guys. Awesome, guys. The prospect of civil war was looming in Washington. Railroads were crossing the land, the camels billeted into the deserts of the Southwest became matters of little or no concern. The camel station in Texas became part of the Confederacy, but the rebel forces likewise had very little use for them. After the war, they auctioned off, but some were reclaimed as stolen property by the federal government, which then released them into the desert. Other veterans of the failed campaign were sold to zoos, circuses, mining companies, and prospectors. A few entrepreneurs tried to use them in mail delivery ventures. Others started long-range hauling operations. None lasted long. Beale showed some mercy toward the beasts of burden, allowed his camels to live out their lives on his ranch in California. Philip Tidrow was one of the entrepreneurs. He knew camels. He was one of the drovers brought to this country with the original herd, and when Beale and Porter were transferred to posts in the eastern United States, he was one of the few experts left to oversee the camels. So if anyone could use them to make an operation successful, he was the man. All right. Started to check the chat, see how everybody's doing. Everybody's getting along just fine. By this time, Tidrow was well known in the deserts of Arizona and California, but nobody knew him by that name. He was of Greek-Syrian origin, and his real name was Philip Tidrow, but he changed it to Haji Ali when he converted to Islam. After arriving in the United States, he underwent another name change, this time to Hi Jolly. The oft-stated reason was that the soldiers with whom he was serving either had difficulty pronouncing his name or were too lazy to learn the correct pronunciation, and had shortened it to Hi Jolly. The name stuck. When the camel experiment withered and died, Hi Jolly brought some of the beasts and established a freight line between Yuma and Tucson. Although the camels were well suited to the task of hauling huge loads across the arid sands, Jolly wasn't suited to life as a businessman. The venture failed. In 1868, he turned his last camel loose near Haley Bend and went to work for them, the Army, as a packer and scout at Fort McDowell near Phoenix. He became an American citizen in 1880 and reverted back to his original name of Philip Tidrow when he signed the papers. He married later that year, and the union produced 2 children before Tidrow or Ali or Jolly. abandoned his family and went prospecting for gold. He was a familiar figure, an old desert rat who hung around the barren areas of both sides of the Colorado River. He died in 1902, but his name lives on. Now the town of Quartzsite on the other side of the river holds High Jolly Days every year, and camels are the festival's theme. His gravesite in a local cemetery is a stone pyramid topped by a copper silhouette of a camel, erected by the state of Arizona in 1935 to commemorate his contributions to the settlement of the territory. It is now the town's most popular tourist attraction. Questions still arrive, however, about High Jolly's connection to the Red Ghost. There are two probable answers. The first is that the Red Ghost may have been one of the camels he tended years before. The second is more appealing to the storytellers. According to the tales that survive him, the old drover perished when he went out into the desert to find a wild camel that had been terrorized in the area. When they found his body, it was lying next to that of a dead camel with one of his arms wrapped around the beast's neck. To this day, no one can substantiate the story, but it is told and retold every year. With every retelling, there is also included some further supposition of the dead camel, so that the dead camel was the Red Ghost. Those tales are, geographically at least, in direct contradiction to the most other stories dealing with the most mysterious creature. High Jolly lived in western Arizona. All the other alleged sightings occurred near the eastern border. However, for years after the dissolution of the Camel Corps, the animals wandered freely across the entire Southwest. Those released by the Army were joined by some that were set loose by mining companies in San Francisco and British Columbia. These herds drifted as far south as Nevada. The ex-Army beasts roamed across Texas, California, and Arizona, so camel sightings were nothing out of the ordinary. But the Red Ghost was indifferent, and those who claimed to have seen him recounted their stories with both anger and fear, even while creating the myth. Is ex-bootlicker in here? Oh, hey, what's up, Joe? And Fex Bootlicker's in here. Hello, X. How you doing, man? Shortly after the incident involving the miners at Eagle Creek, a rancher reported seeing the Red Ghost carrying a rider who didn't appear to be alive. The rider's arms flailed wildly as the camel tore through the countryside, as if he was signaling for help. A prospector swore he saw the beast kill and eat a full-sized brown bear. Another claimed he chased it and saw it disappear before his eyes. By this time, the Red Ghost tales were a definite part of Arizona lore. Even the Hispanic population had adopted him as part of their culture and referred to him as Fantasia Colorado. The stories increased in direct proportion to the ghastliness of it all. Cyrus Hamblin, a rancher who owned a spread near the Salt River about 80 miles northwest of Eagle Creek, was out looking for strays when he climbed to the top of a small ridge to get a better view. He didn't spot any cattle from his perch, but he did see what he thought was a camel. He stayed in the hope of getting a better look. Eventually, the camel walked into an open space, and what Hamlin saw made him a believer. The lump on the camel's back was larger than usual because it was covered with the body of a man. When Hamlin told what he had seen, the skepticism was greatly reduced. Hamlin had spent several years in the area, so he was unfamiliar with the heat of the desert and the tricks it could play. His reputation was widely that of a man who could be trusted. His account was generally accepted as the truth, but if there was a need for more verification, another episode in the story of the Red Ghost soon made Hamlin's version undeniable. Shortly afterwards, the Red Ghost was spotted in the Verde Valley, nearly 60 miles northwest of Hamlin Spread. This time, a group of prospectors not only saw the camel, but were able to get close enough to take a few rifle shots at it. They missed, but the gunfire frightened the animal and it rapidly moved away in the thick undergrowth. As it fled, something fell from its back and rolled away. The miners eagerly retrieved it. The object was a human skull. A skull with shreds of flesh and hair still attached to it. Oh my God. There could be no doubt that there was such a creature as a Red Ghost, but also that the unearthly apparition was carrying a headless rider. Hey, what's up, Charlie? What's up? How do you do? Word of this gruesome discovery spread like the proverbial wildfire throughout the territory, assisted by a small minority of frontier newspaper editors who frequently ignored the facts that stood in the way of a good story. A few days later, also in the Verde River area, a wagon train was bedded down for the night, and when a great beast flapped down on their camp on black wings, it landed with such force that it jarred the ground and knocked over 2 wagons. Terrified, the freighters scattered and stayed away until morning. When they got their courage back and returned to camp, they found prints of huge cloven hooves and red hairs sticking to one of the overturned wagon. The Red Ghost story was met with renewed skepticism, however, primarily because their cargo contained several kegs of whiskey. The Phantom then made its ghostly way to the Phoenix area where the last violent encounter was reported. A cowhand working on a ranch east of the city claimed he had roped a camel he found skulking about a corral. Once caught in the noose, the camel charged the cowboy's horse. The impact knocked both horse and rider to the ground. As the beast passed over them, the cowboy said he observed that the creature was carrying a skeleton on its back. There were other sightings, but none mentioned the camel's human cargo. The stories and the terror they produced continued until 1893 when Mizzou Hastings, an eastern Arizona farmer, spotted a huge red camel grazing in his vegetable patch. Hastings downed the animal with one shot. When he examined the corpse, it still bore the leather straps that one could have been used to tie a human to its back. The Mojave County Miner published this eulogy. Another ghost is laid. Another of the tribe of gaunt hobgoblins that keep the romance of the mysterious southern deserts is gone. Another of the unearthly dangers that the timid Mexican women used to pray against has departed. Mizzou Hastings of Orr was a priest that exorcised this phantom. Mizzou has a ranch a little above the gold camp on the San Francisco River. He woke up one morning and saw through the window of his cabin a big red camel banqueting on his turnip patch. Mizzou took a dead rest on the window sill and blazed away. He got the camel. When he went out to examine the beast, he found that he was all scarred up and had evidently had a very hard time. He was covered with a perfect network of knotted rawhide strips. They had been on him so long that some of the strands had cut their way into the flesh. There actually was a body strapped to the camel, and no one is certain how it got there, but of course there was speculation. This is High Jolly's grave marker in Quartzsite, Arizona. One theory blamed it on a practical joke gone bad. According to that version, a group of soldiers strapped a young recruit to the camel's hump as part of an initiation rite. But something spooked the camel and it took off into the wilderness with its unwilling passengers securely tied to its back. The soldiers tried to catch it but never did. Then they swore each other to secrecy. The truth, if there was any involved, never came out. Hey, Crofty, how you doing? Welcome. Appreciate all you guys being here. You guys are all awesome, man. Thank you guys. Another speculated that a drover got lost in the desert and strapped himself to a camel's back in the vain hope that it would find water. If it did, it was too late, and the lost drover, too weak to free himself, became the headless rider. Regardless, there were no more red ghost sightings after Mizzou Hastings dispatched a turnip eater in his garden. But other camels made occasional appearances for several years afterwards. The last authenticated sighting was reported in 1901 when a survey crew working the Arizona-Mexico border claimed they had seen a herd. But others continued for several more years. A railroad crew said they spotted one near Wickenburg in 1913. A camel allegedly caused a horse stampede near Banning, California in 1929 and in 1941. Persons unnamed said they saw one near California's Salton Sea. Ooh. All right. That's the end of that one. Oh, what'd you guys think of that one? Caught Furry's live at the very end. Just the chillings all together. Late to Jose's live. Forgot to say hi to Fun Loving Couple, and I almost forgot to hit the like button. Dang, Rosie. Yeah, I think. Yeah, that might work. Get a cocktail. Oh, what you got? What did you guys think of that story? Oh, devil! You fear the petting zoo now? So now when you try to go to pet a camel, you're gonna think of the red ghost. Banning, California is pure desert. Hey, man, you never know, man. You might see something out there. All right. Hey, thanks, Luke. Yeah, I try to stay live a little longer, to get everybody in, so that way they have a chance to hear the story. I don't like to stay waiting too long, but you're always welcome to go back and watch it afterwards. So, do you guys like me to continue? I mean, I still got a good amount of time. You got 20 thumbs up. You got 15 people in chat. That's awesome. Hey, what's up, Clyde? Yeah, I'll start another story. This time you'll be able to stay with it here instead of catching half the story. All right, guys. This one is about Teresa Urea, the woman who healed. Okay. And if you guys are ready, I'll go ahead and get started. Hey, thanks for dropping in, ex bootlicker. I appreciate it, man. That was some great singing last night too, man. I appreciate that. You and Karen do pretty damn good, man. You guys get a lot of visitors there, and people love it. Alrighty. Clifton Cemetery was quietly on the slopes along Ward Canyon Road, a winding stretch of pavement that twists its way through the Coppertone Hills southeast of Clifton. It is a lonely place. Two cypress trees rise from the barren surroundings in open defiance of the sun that scorches the land more than 300 days a year. Not many go there now. The cemetery is old and almost filled to capacity, so there's little room for new graves. Creosote bushes have established small stands on some of the plots, but others are well tended to honor those buried there. There was a time more than a century ago when visitors outnumbered in the hundreds. Most of them came to pay homage to their beloved Teresa Urrea, whom they considered a saint. Today, the crowds that search for Teresa Urrea have diminished, almost down to nothing. A scant few, never more than 2 or 3 people at a time, make the occasional journey to search for her grave. Unless they know exactly what they are looking for, they probably don't find what they seek. The grave is unmarked. It is one of several on the hollow ground surrounded by a wrought iron picket fence with no granite headstone, no wooden marker, and no other designation about whose remains lie there. Only a concrete slab covering the grave sets it apart from the others. He should pay you, Karen. Some claim they know which grave is hers, but they are reluctant to point it out. Perhaps they are not sure of the exact location. Perhaps they don't want people flocking to the cemetery and disturbing the solitude that hovers over the sacred ground. They have their reasons, spoken or not. Although her gravesite is an uncertainty, Teresa Urrea's short life actually did end in Clifton on January 11th, 1906. She was 33 years old, a victim of pulmonary consumption. According to some, she asked to be buried next to her father, the same father who had disowned her years earlier because she had gone against his wishes. That may be hearsay, but then much of her life story is hearsay. During her brief time on Earth, she was referred to as a faith healer, revolutionary, scam artist, heretic, common criminal, the New World's Joan of Arc, heroine, fraud, spiritual leader, and a rabble rouser. Damn, they give her a bunch of titles there. Shit. She was averred by many, used by several, and exploited by a few. Thousands believed she could heal the sick. Thousands took up her name in a rebel cause. Very little of this was her own doing. All the stories, all the claims, all the allegations had their beginnings on October 5th, 1873, when Teresa Urrea was born on a ranch north of Ocaroni in the state of Sinaloa, Mexico. She was named Teresa, but usually called Teresita, and she was illegitimate. Her father was Don Tomas Urrea, a wealthy landowner who sired 17 other children with a variety of women. Damn. Shit. 17 children. Okay, hold on. Let me find where I went to here. Oh my goodness. All right, give me a second, guys. I lost my fucking spot. Her mother was Cayetana Chavez, a 14-year-old Yaqui Indian who worked on one of the Don's ranches. Cayetana also had 4 other children of uncertain paternity. But her first 14 years, Teresa had no knowledge of her father because Don Tomas was an important political figure. Her mother raised the children away from the Urrea household, keeping her true identity. Yeah, I was. Then her mother disappeared, leaving Teresa to be raised by an aunt. In 1888, she was moved to her father's ranch in Cabora when she met with Maria Sonora, another of her father's servants, who taught her to use her taught her who taught her the use of herbs to cure certain illnesses. During that time, her father learned of her relationship to him and took her into his immediate family. Life was good then. She studied music and consorted with his political allies, including Lauro Aguirre, a newspaperman, an engineer with strong anti-government views. When Teresa matured, Don Tomas apprenticed her to a curandera, a healer named Huila, who recognized that the girl had healing gifts. Not only that, the elderly woman claimed that Teresa was also a clairvoyant could who could calm patients in extreme pain merely by looking them in the eyes. Huila served as a midwife to Indians of the region. She took the young Teresita on her rounds and swore that the girl could put a woman in labor and into a trance, making the birth painless. Dang, you imagine that? I mean, not using epidurals or any of that shit. Damn. I'm just using spiritual healing there. Huila also introduced her to a Yaqui medicine man who taught her the uses of herbs, plants, and cacti as instruments of healing. She retained everything she learned from Huila and the medicine man and would put the knowledge to use in her later years. But just as her life took this turn for the better, Teresa fell into a catatonic shock allegedly brought on by a rape attempt. Oh, shit. When she was discovered, her body was rigid in a seizure so severe that not even Huila could bring her out of it. She then lapsed into a coma. After 12 days, Don Tomas ordered his ranch hands to build a coffin. On the 13th day, Teresa apparently died. She was examined by Huila, Don Tomas, and a doctor from a neighboring village. They found no pulse, she was cold and not breathing. The servants bathed her, wrapped her in a white burial dress, and placed a rosary around her hands. That night, as they prayed over her body, Teresa sat up and asked why everyone was so sad. Oh, hell. Damn, that just gave me chills right there. After assuring them that she was not dead, she then lapsed into an unconscious state that lasted more than 3 months. The episode changed her life forever. When fully recovered, she began experiencing trances, and in them, she claimed the Virgin Mary instructed her to heal the sick and injured. And so it began. Some of her earlier cures were spectacular in themselves, but grew to mythical proportions when repeated by those around her and those she cured. In one case, she gave audience to a young farmhand who had been kicked in the head by a mule. She picked up a handful of soil, spit into it, and wiped the mud on the man's wound. Those who witnessed the event said he was instantly healed. News of her curative power spread. As the stories grew, so did her band of followers. The stream of devotees coming to the ranch grew steadily. The roads leading to her father's ranch were filled with those hoping to be cured. Teresa obliged. She turned no one away and never requested payment of any kind for those she cured. This created a hardship for Don Tomas because it meant he had to dig new wells, hire extra help, and lay in supplies to deal with the faithful who were coming in crowds as large as 5,000 per day. Damn. It's a big crowd. Among them were large numbers of Christianized Indians, Yaquis, and males from Sonora. The Gusabis from Sinaloa and the Tomachitecos and Tarahumaras from Chihuahua. Most were barefoot, but they walked for miles across the harsh landscape to visit the young woman who had become a living idol. Many of them had been forced off their land by the government, a factor that would later play a key role in the legend of Teresa Urrea. The Indians were soon followed by Mexicans, then Americans. Inevitably, Newspaper and magazine reporters also began showing up, lured by the prospect of a good story. Teresa was soon an international celebrity featured in articles that appeared in the New York Times, San Francisco Daily Examiner, Los Angeles Times, and Overland Monthly. The trouble started about the same time. The Indians held her in awe, but her reputation was becoming a cause of great concern for the Mexican government and the Catholic Church. Members of the Tomo Chiteco tribe were so impressed after she cured one of their warriors of a tumor that they proclaimed her Santa Teresa and installed her as their village saint. They carved an image of her out of native wood and placed it in the mission church right next to the statues of Jesus and the Virgin Mary. This bordered on heresy, and it did not sit well with the missionaries who had spent years converting the natives. A circuit riding priest in charge of maintaining Catholicism among the tribes came in Tomochic and flew into a rage when he found the wooden idol. Already troubled by her growing fame, he sent a message to the Vatican, then telegraphed Mexican President Porfirio Diaz and requested federal intervention. Almost simultaneously, government spies also sent Diaz a telegram asserting that Teresa was preaching liberation to the tribes. Some of the allegations were true. Teresa preached justice to the tribes that had been subjected to genocidal wars, land seizures, and forced relocation. After the federal troops hanged a 3-year-old boy from a tree, she announced the government's tactic in a written statement. Do you wonder why the tribe fights forces of such a government? My poor Indians. They are the bravest and most persecuted people on earth. They will fight for their rights until they win or are exterminated. God help them. There are a few of them left. Yeah. It was a time directly headed toward revolution. Oh, hold on. All right. Just gotta move my. Hey, what's up? Super Dog, my brother. What's happening, man? Yeah, I'm gonna move it over just a little bit, guys. Just 1 second. Oh, damn. Hey, I'm sorry to hear that, man. I hope you get better. The only thing that sucks about wintertime is everybody gets sick. Damn. Puts everybody under the weather. I do hope you get better, man. Oh, shit. God damn. Damn, that's a long damn time to be sick. Well, I do hope you get over it, or sounds like eventually you might have to go to the hospital, which you probably don't want to do. But hey, man, I just hope you get better, man. Or anybody else that's sick, you know. It was a time directly headed toward revolution. In situations like that, there arises a cause, and a cause needs a leader. Fortunately for her, the Tomachitecos assigned that role to Teresa Urea. At the same time, the federal government, under direct orders from President Diaz, down a moved to put down a rebellion by the Tomachitecos. Diaz was deeply troubled by the influence that the young woman had apparently had over the tribe. ignoring the fact that she neither asked for nor wanted such power. Those who fought back had adopted the battle cry of Viva de Santa de Cabora, and they were ferocious in their resistance. This also was attributed to Teresa, although she had nothing to do with it. To make matters worse, the Indians openly sought her blessings for a series of revolts over land boundaries. She refused, but inadvertently gave tacit support to the cause when she reportedly told the rebels that God intended for you to have the lands, or He would not have given them to you. In 1891, an armed rebel group holed up in a village after fighting a government force. The federales encircled the village and burned it to the ground. Women and children who took refuge in the church met fiery deaths in an incident so horrible the revolutionaries took up the battle cry and began calling themselves Teresistas. Diaz was so threatened that he had to take action. Fearful of losing his power over the tribes, he denounced Teresa as the most dangerous girl in Mexico and sent her and her father into exile in 1892. Although there was no evidence that might have convicted of anything resembling treason, they were shipped by railroad to Nogales, Arizona, and ordered never to return. And the legend grew all along the railroad line. Indian warriors on foot and horseback raised their weapons and salute as the train passed. Hey, what's up, O3? Hey, man, it's been a while. Hey, it's good to see you. I hope you had a good Christmas and an even better New Year. The action was sensationalized and distorted by the press and drew conflicting reports all across Mexico and the United States. On June 16, 1892, the New York Times carried a front page story headlined, "A Saint to be Shot." The story, dateline San Antonio, Texas, declared that a businessman who had recently returned from Guaymas, Sonora, said, "The wildest excitement exists among the ignorant classes of Mexicans throughout the state of Sonora over the arrest and conviction of Teresa Urrea, the celebrated saint of Cachiora. Saint Teresa was arrested 3 weeks ago by a detachment of soldiers who escorted her and her aged father, Thomas Urrea, to Guaymas. Both were heavily ironed and were kept closely confined in prison until placed on trial." According to the story, the judge found both guilty of witchery. Oh. The judge found both guilty of witchery. Teresa was sentenced to be shot and her father imprisoned for life. The report also noted that she is possessed of some strange power, and the judge firmly believes that she is a witch, then concluded that she awaits her fate quietly and offered no defense when on trial. Oh, yeah. Yeah, Rosie, yeah, you better believe it. But the June 28, 1892 edition of the Times printed somewhat of a retraction by announcing, again on the front page, that the reported execution of the celebrated Teresa Urrea, the saint of Socorro, some days ago is untrue. The story was purposely circulated by the Mexican authorities in order to quell the excitement among the restless Indians who were becoming dangerous and flocking to Nogales in great numbers to see their patron saint and receive her wonderful treatment for all diseases. What happened, the Times explained, was that Teresa did attempt to return to her former home in Mexico, but was intercepted by the police, who issued the false report about her death. The article ended with, "She was again transported to the United States border and warned that if she ventured into Mexico again, she would be put to death." Wow. Dang, man. Everybody's just turning their backs on her everywhere she goes. Although she apparently agreed to the terms of her exile, the controversy didn't end. The thousands of pilgrims who flocked to Nogales to see her became recruitment prospects for the revolutionaries, who are now openly plotting to overthrow the Diaz government. The never-ending pressure to become actively involved became too much for Teresa. She and her father left Nogales and relocated in Solomonville in eastern Arizona Territory in 1895. A year later, they moved to El Paso, Texas, but that city was too close to the Mexican border. The harassment continued. After 5 and 3 assassination attempts, Teresa still refused to take sides in the ongoing conflicts and even made a rare statement to the El Paso Herald, saying, "I have noticed with much pain that the persons who have taken up arms in Mexican territory have invoked my name in aid of the schemes they are carrying through. But I repeat, I am not one who authorizes or at the same time interferes with those proceedings." The declaration had little effect. Rebels led by Lauro Aguirre attacked a customs house in Nogales. 14 people from both sides were slain. Some of the dead revolutionaries had photographs of Teresa Urrea pinned to their clothing, and the government used that to further the anti-Teresa campaign. One of the survivors was taken to court where he blamed Lauro Aguirre and Teresa's father, Don Tomas, for much of the trouble because the girl wants her to. Because the girl does as he wants her to. Aguirre was at that time publishing El Independiente, a Texas newspaper, and Teresa was writing columns for the publication. Aguirre spread her fame through his writing, but she refused him and asked her to join him in his plans to launch a full-scale revolution. Then on August 13th, 1896, Aguirre led the armed revolt and blew up the customs house. Teresa was stunned. And as reported of the incident, the August 20th, 1896 edition of the New York Times observed, "Aguirre is the worst, they say, as he was complete control over Teresa's father. He is a highly educated man in his language, but is said to be dissipated. It is estimated by the Mexican officials here that he and Santa Teresa, by their influence, have caused the death of more than 1,000 people in the last 6 or 7 years." Drink beer. I remember you saying that too. You don't drink the water because the fish fucking it. Drinks, yeah. I mean, beer does have water in it, but not what you really need. Get you some good bottled water with fucking electrolytes and all that shit, and all that good stuff that's in the water. This episode fueled the Mexican government's intense hatred for Teresa and her father. The beleaguered duo was forced to leave El Paso and settle in Clifton, a mining community in eastern Arizona Territory. She continued to minister to the sick and poor, and her reputation continued to grow. One story said that when her curing powers occurred, the chemistry of her body changed and her perspiration had an aroma similar to perfume. Another folktale recounted that her helpers were selling her bathwater as a miraculous cure-all. At the same time, the Los Angeles Times observed that this exiled saint seems to be the embodiment of simplicity, and to look into her mysterious dark eyes, one would never think her capable of instigating an insurrection. But if newspaper reports of that era were to be considered the truth and nothing but the truth, Teresa did make at least one more trip to Mexico. The January 29th, 1898 edition of La Belle de la Nouvelle New Orleans reported that she had returned to her native country after a brief sojourn in Arizona. The story read, in part, Reports have reached Hermosillo that she is among the Yaqui Indians, exerting her wonderful influences to stir them up to go on the warpath. About 200 braves have allied themselves to her financial cause, her to her fanatical cause, and a raid is threatened at any time. She has incited three small revolutions on the border against the Mexican government and has been the cause of much bloodshed. Once again, Teresa was forced to make public denials of her involvement while trying to lead what for her was a normal life. Despite her notoriety, she might have found serenity if fate hadn't intervened once more. It happened in 1900 when the Santa Cobora turned uncharacteristically commercial. She hooked up with a medical company in New York and what was billed as a nationwide curing crusade. The company offered her $10,000 and she accepted on the condition that none of her patients would be changed for her help. On the terms of her contract, she left Clifton and moved to California, where she appeared to be an instant success. A December 1902 edition of the Los Angeles Times carried a report that said, in part, "The halt, the blind, the inwardly distressed, paralytics almost helpless, and others ravaged by consumption are helped to her doors each day by friends and relatives, and none go there without the belief that by laying on her magic hands they will be cured. Santa Teresa has great powers over the Yaquis from whose country she sprang, and has been the subject of many fantastic stories based more or less on fact. In some ways, her influence is really remarkable." But all was not well. She discovered that her parents in the venture were nothing more than snake oil merchants who, despite the promises made in the contract, were exorbitant fees from her followers. Disillusioned and disheartened, Teresa found a lawyer who got her out of contract, and she returned to Clifton. Not to a happy ending, however. Back home, she and her father had a major falling out over her choice of husbands. She wanted to marry Guadalupe Rodriguez, a mine worker. Don Tomas forbade the union. She married him anyway. The marriage lasted less than a day. Her new husband pulled a gun and marched her into the surrounding desert where he shot her. She had refused to go to Mexico with him. His aim was faulty, however, and Teresa suffered only a flesh wound. She fled, and the townspeople soon captured Rodriguez. He was tried, judged insane, and sentenced to an asylum. Wow. Damn, she gets married with the guy that she wasn't supposed to, and the guy shoots her out in the desert. But he didn't kill her. Things did get better after that, but only for a while. She married John Van Order, and the couple had two daughters, Laura born in 1902 and Magdalena born in 1904. But a blissful life was not in her future. Shortly after her second birth, Teresa's health began to fail. Her followers said she had given away to much of her soul while healing the sick and injured. She opened a small clinic where she continued to practice her brand of medicine. When a major flood threatened to inundate Clifton, she was among those who spent freezing nights filling and stacking sandbags. All that activity took a toll on Teresa, and she was diagnosed with pulmonary tuberculosis in 1905. Although too weak to stand, she continued to bless all those who came to see her almost up to the time of her death. A late gathering of followers attended her funeral, without their beloved saint preaching to them and healing them. However, they eventually found other pursuits. Over time, fewer and fewer people remembered her. For the next 80 years, the story of Teresa Urrea lay dormant along with her remains in an untended cemetery where the sun is the only constant and where an occasional rainfall reshapes the landscape while imperiling the graves. It might have stayed that way except for the interest of Luis Perez, a professor from Silver City, New Mexico, who was considered one of the greatest living authorities on the legend of Teresita. According to a story published in the March 25, 1996 edition of the Arizona Republic, Perez had heard the stories about the lost grave and came to Clifton, determined to find it. He discovered an old photograph of a painting that showed her burial plot. By watching landmarks, he established what is now considered the official gravesite. The discovery, made in 1993, brought about another minor miracle, according to Walter Maris, a Clifton newspaper publisher and member of the Clifton Chamber of Commerce. Maris said that in 1994, the Clifton Town Council had appointed a graveyard sexton and gave him the manpower to clean up the cemetery, which had been sorely neglected for several years. Volunteers helped with the restoration, and for the first time in decades, the burial ground became a place to go and reflect. Not just an area to be visited in a time of sorrow. When you have trials and tribulations and there is so much tumult, the peace of Teresita is beyond description. Maris said it wasn't the same adulation that had been bestowed upon her before. A century before, but there was a brief resurgence of Teresita fervor. City officials announced plans to build a small shrine next to her gravesite. Next, the town established an annual Fiesta de la Santa de Cabora. A day-long celebration included a pilgrimage to her gravesite, music, food, art shows, and dancers. The excitement didn't endure, however. Within a decade, economics and local politics forced cancellation of the festival. The shrine never got beyond the planning stage. Today, the sun rises and sets over an unmarked grave where only a few undetermined visitors came to visit. Maybe the grave of Teresa Urrea, the Santa Cabora. Yeah, that's gonna do it for that one, guys. What do you guys think of that one? Yeah, that kind of sucks. They didn't make her a shrine or even put anything there to say that she was buried there. And they just quit, the festivals after what, just that one time. Yeah, man, that's kind of sucks, man. Her name was Teresa. I don't know if any of you guys think of Mother Teresa. The same person. That healed the way she did. That's what that makes me think of. That's what I was thinking the whole time. The Mother Teresa thing. Awesome, guys. Awesome. I do thank you guys all for being here. If anyone would be so kind as to donate anything you guys might have, just to get a bite to eat, because yeah, I'm hungry myself right now, man. If you guys do have anything to spare, please, whether it's $5, maybe a couple of dollars or whatever, anything helps, guys. I'll see what I could do about getting PayPal. I don't know how that would work, but I do thank you guys once again, and we'll see you guys out here tomorrow. Hopefully it's another nice and sunny day. Thank you guys very much. This is Jose G. Catch you guys mañana.